Honestly, where did you even learn to speak English? Just one sentence. One sarcastic, belittling question fired from the lips of a bored airport agent at New York's JFK. The target? A black woman in a tailored suit whose accent, rich with the cadence of her Nigerian heritage, was apparently too much for the agent to handle. What that agent, Brenda Jenkins, didn't know was that she wasn't just talking to another passenger. She was talking to Dr. Imani Hayes, the founder of the Wanderlust Kinship Collective, a private, members-only travel group that directed an astonishing $950 million in annual spending. The fallout from that one sentence wouldn't just cost Brenda her job. It would ignite a corporate firestorm, send an airline stock into a nosedive, and prove that sometimes the quietest voice can cause the loudest explosion. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual symphony of controlled chaos. It was a humid late July afternoon, and the atmosphere was a cocktail of jet fuel, Cinnabon, and human anxiety. The murmur of 1,000 different conversations in 100 different languages blended with the intermittent squawk of the PA system and the relentless rumble of rolling suitcases on linoleum floors. For most, it was just noise. For Dr. Imani Hayes, it was the overture to an adventure. Imani carried herself with an understated grace that commanded attention without demanding it. At 47, her face was framed by intricate micro braids threaded with subtle hints of silver, and she wore a bespoke emerald green suit that spoke of quiet confidence and success. Her gait was unhurried as she navigated the river of travelers, her leather briefcase in one hand and her carry-on gliding silently behind her. She was heading home to London after a week of successful negotiations in Manhattan, and the prospect of being back in her own space, with her books and her garden, was a comforting thought. Her accent, a beautiful and precise melody of received pronunciation learned at Oxford, and the warm lyrical tones of her Yoruba upbringing in Lagos, often turned heads. It was a living testament to her journey, a woman who had built an empire not with bricks and mortar, but with something far more powerful: community. That empire was the Wanderlust Kinship Collective, or WKC. What started 15 years ago as a simple blog for Black professionals who loved to travel had blossomed into the most influential private travel consortium in the world. Its 75,000 members were doctors, lawyers, engineers, artists, and entrepreneurs from across the diaspora. They didn't just book holidays, they booked entire wings of hotels, chartered private jets for group excursions, and bought out blocks of first and business class seats. Their collective annual travel expenditure was a figure that made airline and hotel executives salivate, just shy of $1 billion. And Imani Hayes was their unofficial but universally acknowledged queen. She arrived at Gate B24, where Apex Air Flight 101 to London Heathrow was scheduled to begin boarding. The gate area was a scrum of weary travelers. A long, disorganized queue had already formed, snaking back from the podium where two gate agents were working. Imani, holding a first-class ticket, knew she could wait for priority boarding, so she found a seat with a view of the tarmac, watching the ground crew scurry around the massive Boeing 777 that would carry her across the Atlantic. After about 20 minutes, the announcement for pre-boarding began. Imani gathered her things and joined the much shorter priority lane. The agent on the left was a young man who seemed flustered but polite, efficiently scanning passports and tickets. The agent on the right, however, was a different story. Her name tag read Brenda. She was a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes, thinly plucked eyebrows, and a permanent frown etched into her face. Her Apex Air uniform was slightly rumpled, and she chewed her gum with a slow, resentful rhythm. Brenda Jenkins had worked this job for 22 years. The youthful excitement she once had for aviation and travel had long since been eroded by rude passengers, long hours, and the gnawing feeling that her life hadn't gone according to plan. She saw the world not as a place of wonder, but as a procession of demanding, entitled people she had to process. As Imani reached the front of the line, she stepped up to Brenda's podium. She smiled warmly and placed her passport and boarding pass on the counter. "Good afternoon," Imani said, her voice clear and pleasant. Brenda didn't look up. She snatched the documents, her eyes scanning the screen of her computer. She grunted. "You're in the wrong line," Economy boards later. Imani's smile didn't falter. I believe that's a first-class ticket, she replied calmly. Seat 2A. Brenda finally lifted her eyes, a flicker of annoyance in them. She looked at Imani's ticket, then back at her face, her expression curdling into one of mild disbelief. She had already typecast Imani in her mind, someone who probably got lucky with an upgrade and didn't know the rules. The elegant suit and expensive luggage didn't register as signs of status, but as pretension. Right. 2A, Brenda muttered, her voice dripping with skepticism. She began tapping at her keyboard with a theatrical slowness. She squinted at the screen, then back at Imani's passport photo, then at her face again. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Other passengers in the line began to shift their weight. Is there a problem? Imani asked, her tone still even but now laced with a new firmness. Brenda leaned forward, resting her elbows on the counter. A smirk played on her lips. I'm just having a little trouble understanding you, ma'am, she said, her voice now artificially sweet and loud enough for others to hear. She tilted her head. That accent is very thick. Can you try that again in English, honey? The air seemed to still. The words, so casually cruel, hung there like poison. For a moment, Imani was genuinely stunned into silence. It wasn't the first time she had encountered prejudice, but the sheer, unvarnished audacity of it in such a public setting was breathtaking. She could feel the stares of the people behind her. Some were embarrassed, looking away. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. Imani took a slow, deliberate breath, her mind a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. But on the outside, she became a statue of composure. The warm smile was gone, replaced by a gaze as cold and hard as diamond. There is nothing wrong with my English, she stated, her voice dropping a full octave. Each word was enunciated with surgical precision. I have a doctorate in English literature from the University of Oxford. I am perfectly fluent. You, on the other hand, seem to have a significant problem with basic civility. Brenda was taken aback by the sharp, articulate response. Her petty power play was being challenged. Instead of backing down, she doubled down, resorting to mimicry. Oh, a doctorate from Oxford, she cooed, crudely imitating Imani's accent. Well, la-di-da. All I know is you're holding up my line. She stamped the boarding pass with unnecessary force and shoved it across the counter. Have a nice flight, doctor. The sarcasm was a slap in the face. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over Imani. But it was immediately followed by something else, a cold, clarifying anger. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small, foreign, or less than because of how they looked or spoke. Without another word, Imani picked up her documents. She did not rush away in a huff. She held Brenda's gaze for a long, heavy moment, her eyes communicating a message far more powerful than any verbal threat. Then she turned and walked down the jet bridge, her posture ramrod straight, the click of her heels on the metal floor echoing like the cocking of a gun. Brenda Jenkins watched her go, a triumphant sneer on her face. She turned to the next passenger, a middle-aged white man in a polo shirt. You believe the nerve of some people? She said with a conspiratorial eye roll. The man just shook his head and looked away, not wanting to be part of it. Brenda shrugged, oblivious. She had won her little power struggle. She had put the woman with the fancy suit and funny accent in her place. In the grand, tedious scheme of her day, it was a minor victory. She had absolutely no idea that she had just lit the fuse on a $950 million bomb. The first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 101 was an oasis of beige leather and muted tones, a world away from the terminal's chaos. A flight attendant named Charlotte, with a genuine smile and kind eyes, offered Imani a glass of champagne and a warm towel as she settled into seat 2A. Under normal circumstances, Imani would have savored this moment. The gentle hum of the aircraft, the promise of a smooth flight, the crisp bite of the champagne. But today, the bubbles in her glass seemed to mock her. The humiliation from the gate was a bitter taste in her mouth that even the expensive champagne couldn't wash away. The public mimicry, the condescending honey, the blatant disrespect, it coiled in her stomach like a venomous snake. Her first instinct was a primal one, to storm back to the gate, demand to speak to a manager, and create a scene that Brenda Jenkins would never forget. She could have. She had the status, the confidence, and certainly the justification. But Imani Hayes hadn't built her empire on theatrical outbursts. She had built it on strategy, precision, and the understanding that true power is rarely loud. She politely declined a second glass of champagne, pulled her slim laptop from her briefcase, and connected to the plane's Wi-Fi. The anger was still there, a white-hot coal in her chest, but she channeled it. She would not give Brenda the satisfaction of a screaming match. She would give her something far worse: consequences. She opened her encrypted email client. Her fingers, steady and sure, began to fly across the keyboard. This would not be a rambling, emotional complaint to a generic customer service address. It would be a digital thunderbolt, aimed with pinpoint accuracy. The to field was a carefully curated list. It included the 10 members of the WKC Global Leadership Council, a board of highly influential members who help steer the collective's partnerships. Their ranks included a tech CEO from Atlanta, a renowned surgeon from Chicago, a venture capitalist from London, and a media mogul from Toronto. The CC field was even more important. Using a database the WKC maintained for exactly this purpose, she added the direct corporate email addresses for Richard Sterling, the CEO of Apex Air, Sarah Chen, the Chief Operating Officer, and the entire Investor Relations Department. The subject line was simple, cold, and devastating. Subject: immediate and indefinite suspension of WKC partnership with Apex Air. Then she began to write. She did not use exclamation points. She did not use emotional or accusatory language. She simply reported the facts with the detached clarity of a legal brief. Dear members of the Council and to the executive leadership of Apex Air, this email serves as formal notification of an incident that occurred today, July 31st, 2025, at approximately 3:20 p.m. Eastern Time at John F. Kennedy International Airport, Gate B24, for Apex Air Flight 101 to London Heathrow. While attempting to board, I was subjected to a deeply unprofessional and xenophobic encounter with your gate agent, Ms. Brenda Jenkins, as per her name tag. My boarding process was deliberately delayed while Ms. Jenkins loudly questioned my eligibility for first-class travel. When I responded to her query, she proceeded to mock my accent, asking me to speak English, and then crudely mimicking my speech in a derogatory manner in front of numerous other passengers. She referred to me in condescending terms and dismissed my professional credentials with open sarcasm. The entire exchange was a display of targeted disrespect rooted in prejudice. The Wanderlust Kinship Collective, WKC, was founded on principles of dignity, respect, in the celebration of our global diaspora. Our members, who represent a significant and loyal customer base for the travel industry, choose their partners based not only on service quality, but on shared values. The behavior of Ms. Jenkins is not an isolated customer service issue. It is a fundamental violation of the values our $950 million in annual travel spending represents, therefore effective immediately. 1. The Wanderlust Kinship Collective is enacting a complete and indefinite boycott of all Apex Air flights by all 75,000-plus members worldwide. 2. All existing bookings with Apex Air made through WKC channels will be canceled within the next 24 hours. Future travel will be rerouted through your competitors, who have consistently demonstrated a commitment to inclusive and respectful service. 3. Our exclusive partnership agreement, which directs an estimated $950 million in annual revenue to your airline, is hereby suspended. This is not a negotiation. It is a statement of principle. The WKC will not financially support any corporation that permits such bigotry and disrespect to be a part of its customer experience. A detailed summary of this incident will be shared with our entire membership momentarily. We trust they will act accordingly. Sincerely, Dr. Imani Hayes, founder, Wanderlust Kinship Collective. She read the email twice, her expression grim. Then with a final, decisive click, she hit send. The email shot out into the digital ether just as the plane began its pushback from the gate. Down on the ground, Brenda Jenkins was finishing her shift, complaining to her colleague about her sore feet and the ridiculous passenger she'd had to deal with. She clocked out, blissfully unaware that her life was about to be irrevocably altered. Thousands of miles away, in different time zones, phones began to chime. In a high-rise office in Chicago, Dr. Robert Akinjide, a top neurosurgeon and WKC council member, was between surgeries. He saw the email, read it, and his jaw tightened. He immediately forwarded it to his personal travel agent with a simple two-word instruction: liquidate Apex. In London, where it was already late evening, a venture capitalist named Amelia Davies read the email on her phone as she was getting into bed. She sat straight up, her fatigue vanishing. She spent the next hour on a conference call with two other European Council members, strategizing. Within 15 minutes, the WKC's internal servers were buzzing. The email from Imani was reposted on their private forum, the Voyagers Lounge. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Decades of collective microaggressions and outright racism experienced during travel found a focal point. Unacceptable. Booked on Apex for my family to go to Hawaii next month. Cancelled. My company has a corporate account with them. Not anymore. Emailing my CEO now. This Brenda Jenkins needs to be famous. The boycott wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, executed with the swift, unified precision of a special forces operation. They were a community, a kinship. An insult to one was an insult to all. Meanwhile, back at JFK, Kevin Schmidt, the duty manager for Apex Air, was getting ready to close out his shift report. He was a man who lived by the book and hated complications. His phone buzzed with a notification from the corporate escalations team. It was a copy of Imani's email, flagged with the highest possible priority. Kevin read the email, his eyes growing wider with each sentence. 950 million? He whispered the number aloud in his empty office. It sounded like a typo. He frantically searched his system for Gate B-24's staffing. Brenda Jenkins. He groaned. He knew Brenda. She was sour, frequently complained about, but usually for being slow or curt, not for igniting an international incident. He called Brenda's personal cell phone. She answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed. What? Brenda, it's Kevin from the airport. I need to ask you about an interaction you had with a passenger at Gate B-24 today. A Dr. Imani Hayes on the flight to Heathrow. Brenda scoffed. Oh, her. Yeah, she was giving me a hard time, being all high and mighty. Had a weird accent. I handled it. How exactly did you handle it, Brenda? Kevin asked, his voice strained. Did you comment on her accent? There was a pause. I might have said something. She was being difficult to understand, Brenda said defensively. What's this about? Did she actually complain? Some people will whine about anything. Kevin felt a cold dread wash over him. Brenda's cavalier attitude confirmed everything. She had no idea what she had done. Brenda, he said, his voice low, you need to come back to the airport. Now. Corporate is involved. He hung up the phone and stared at the email on his screen. This was no longer a customer service complaint. This was a Category 5 hurricane, and he was standing at ground zero. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Apex Air, believed he was having a good day. He had just finished a round of golf with a banking executive at a private club in Greenwich, Connecticut. He was sitting in the back of his chauffeured Maybach, gliding down the highway toward his palatial home, scrolling through market reports on his tablet. Apex stock was stable, fuel costs were down, and summer booking numbers were strong. He was a man at the top of his game, insulated from the gritty reality of airport terminals and disgruntled passengers by layers of subordinates and a 9-figure net worth. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his COO, Sarah Chen. Richard, we have a code red situation. Check your email for a message regarding WKC. Call me ASAP. Sterling sighed. Sarah was brilliant, a master of logistics and data, but she could be prone to hyperbole. A code red was probably a minor logistics snag in Frankfurt or a baggage system failure in Dallas. Annoying but hardly company threatening. He opened his email, found the message from Imani Hayes, and began to read. His nonchalance evaporated. The cigar he had been planning to light sat forgotten in his hand. He read the email once, then a second time, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his tablet. 950 million? He said the words aloud to the empty car, just as Kevin Schmidt had done in his tiny office. The number was not a typo. He knew of the Wanderlust Kinship Collective. Their corporate partnership team had spent 2 years courting the group, finally landing an exclusive deal 6 months prior. It had been hailed in their last shareholder meeting as a major coup, a pipeline to a wealthy, loyal, and previously underserved demographic. He immediately called Sarah. She picked up on the first ring. "Tell me this is a joke," was the first thing out of his mouth. "I've been on the phone with our head of corporate partnerships for the last hour." Sarah's voice was tight and clipped. "All business." "It's not a joke, Richard. The cancellations have already started. We're not talking about a few dozen. We're talking about thousands. They're organized and they're moving fast. Their internal booking portal, which routes through our API, has been shut down. The fire hose of cash they were sending us has been turned off." Sterling felt a prickle of sweat on his brow. It's one gate agent, one stupid comment. They're going to burn a whole relationship over that? "According to this email, yes," Sarah retorted. "And honestly, can you blame them? The woman she insulted wasn't just a member. She's the founder, the queen bee. And according to the incident report I just got from the JFK manager, the agent, Brenda Jenkins, basically confessed to it, called the victim high and mighty, and admitted to mocking her." "Fire her," Sterling snapped. "Fire her immediately. Issue a public apology. Send Dr. Hayes a travel voucher for $10,000 and a case of Dom Perignon. Fix it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Richard," Sarah said, her voice dangerously calm, "I don't think you're grasping the scale of this. This isn't about a voucher. Read the email again. This is not a negotiation. This isn't just a PR problem anymore. I've been monitoring social media. It's starting to break out of their private forums. The hashtag #WanJop boycott Apex Air is bubbling up." As if on cue, Sterling's tablet pinged with a news alert from a major financial publication. Apex Air, APX, facing potential 9-figure loss as influential travel group alleges racist incident. His blood ran cold. The story was already out. A member of the WKC, who was also a freelance journalist, had wasted no time. The article contained sanitized but powerful excerpts from Amani's email. It didn't name her, referring to her only as a prominent black female executive, but it named Apex Air, JFK, and the Wanderlust Kinship Collective, along with their staggering $950 million travel budget. The market, which was still open for another hour, reacted instantly. Traders and algorithms, smelling blood, began to sell. On his screen, Sterling watched the green ticker for APX flicker, turn yellow, and then plunge into a terrifying red. Down 1%, down 2.5%, down 5%. In minutes, hundreds of millions of dollars in market capitalization had vanished. All because Brenda Jenkins, a $40,000 a year employee, had decided to be cruel. The panic at Apex Air headquarters was palpable. The corporate communications floor, usually clearing out by this time, was a flurry of frantic activity. Phones were ringing off the hook. The investor relations team was being bombarded with calls from analysts and major shareholders demanding to know what the hell was going on. "Get me a full profile on this Dr. Amani Hayes," Sterling barked into his phone at Sarah. "I want to know everything, her background, her business, her dog's name, and get Brenda Jenkins into an office. I want her gone before the sun comes up." "Already on it," Sarah replied. "But Richard, a quick firing and an apology isn't going to be enough. This is systemic. They see this as a reflection of our corporate culture. We don't just need to cut out the cancer. We need to convince them the whole body isn't diseased." Sterling hung up, his mind racing. He was a numbers guy, a deal maker. He was used to battles fought in boardrooms over contracts and mergers, not this new amorphous warfare waged on social media with hashtags as weapons. He felt a profound sense of helplessness. His airline was being brought to its knees, not by a rival or a recession, but by a single story of disrespect that had resonated with tens of thousands of people. The fallout was just beginning. By the time Sterling's Maybach pulled into his driveway, Apex Air's stock had closed down nearly 12%, wiping out over $400 million in shareholder value. News vans were already setting up on the street outside the Apex Air corporate campus. And Brenda Jenkins, who had just arrived back at JFK in a state of bewildered annoyance, was about to walk into an HR meeting that would be the end of her career. The digital thunderbolt had struck, and the billion-dollar panic was in full swing. The world would now watch to see if Apex Air could survive the storm. Brenda Jenkins drove back to JFK International Airport under a bruised purple sky, the remnants of a summer thunderstorm. She was fuming. The call from her duty manager, Kevin, had been absurd. "You need to come back to the airport, now. Corporate is involved." Her mind raced, constructing a fortress of indignation around herself. She pictured the woman with the fancy suit and the strange accent, Dr. whatever her name was, typing out a whiny complaint from her luxurious seat, probably just angling for a few thousand airline miles. Brenda had dealt with her type before, entitled, overly sensitive, looking for any excuse to feel important. "I handled it," she muttered to her reflection in the rearview mirror, rehearsing her defense. Passenger was being difficult, had an attitude, couldn't understand a word she was saying. "I remained professional under duress." Yes, that sounded right. She was the victim here, the long-suffering employee enduring the whims of the public. The chip on her shoulder was so large it felt like a second head. Walking back into the fluorescent-lit employee corridors of Terminal 4 felt different this time. The usual end-of-day camaraderie was absent. A few colleagues who would normally wave just gave her quick, nervous glances before looking away, their faces suddenly unreadable. A prickle of unease started to cut through her anger. This felt bigger than a standard passenger complaint. Kevin Schmidt met her not in his own cluttered office, but outside a sterile, windowless conference room in the HR section, a place employees only visited for onboarding or termination. His face was ashen, his usual harried expression replaced by one of pure dread. Standing beside him was a woman Brenda had only seen once or twice before. Maria Flores, the regional head of human resources, was a woman who radiated an aura of calm, lethal competence. Her presence confirmed Brenda's unease had been an understatement. This was a firing squad. "Brenda, thanks for coming in," Kevin said, his voice barely a whisper. He ushered her inside. The room was cold, furnished with a cheap laminate table and uncomfortable chairs. It smelled faintly of bleach and anxiety. "What in God's name is this all about, Kevin?" Brenda demanded, trying to seize control, to project the anger that had carried her all the way back to the airport. "I had to drive all the way back here from Queens because some passenger got her feelings hurt?" Maria Flores gestured to a chair. Her movements were economical, her expression impassive. "Please have a seat, Miss Jenkins." Brenda sat, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "We need to discuss in detail your interaction with a passenger named Dr. Imani Hayes at Gate B24 this afternoon," Maria began, her voice even. "Can you walk me through what happened from your perspective?" Brenda launched into her well-rehearsed narrative. She painted a picture of a chaotic gate, a confusing passenger, and her own valiant attempts to maintain order. And her accent was just so thick I could barely make out what she was saying. I asked her to repeat herself, maybe a bit loudly because of the noise, and she immediately got defensive, started puffing herself up about being a doctor from Oxford. Maria listened patiently, her fingers steepled, her eyes never leaving Brenda's face. When Brenda finished, the silence in the room was heavy. "Thank you, Brenda," Maria said. The use of her first name felt unnervingly intimate. "Now I'm going to read you a few phrases from a formal complaint that was sent not to JFK customer service, but directly to our CEO and our board of investors. Loudly questioned my eligibility for first-class travel. Mocked my accent. Crude mimicry. Asked me to try again in English, honey. Do any of these phrases sound familiar to you?" Brenda felt the blood drain from her face. The casual cruelty she had dispensed so easily was now being read back to her like a court indictment. "She's lying," Brenda stammered, her voice suddenly thin. "She's twisting my words. I was just what, Brenda?" Maria's voice hardened almost imperceptibly. "Doing your job? Is it part of your job description to impersonate a passenger's speech pattern? Is it company policy to address a first-class passenger as honey while questioning her literacy?" She slid a printed document across the table. It was Imani's email. "This is a direct communication from Dr. Hayes. She is the founder of the Wanderlust Kinship Collective. Perhaps you've heard of them?" Brenda shook her head, bewildered. The name meant nothing to her. "They are, or rather were, one of Apex Air's most significant corporate partners," Maria continued, her tone as sharp as breaking glass. A private travel group that directs nearly $1 billion in annual travel spending. As a direct result of your conduct today, they have initiated a full boycott of our airline. All 75,000 of their members have been instructed to cancel their flights and rebook with our competitors. The last I checked, just before you arrived, our stock price was down 12%. That represents a loss of over $400 million in shareholder value, Brenda. In 2 hours. The numbers were so vast, so abstract, they didn't compute. $1 billion? $400 million? All because of a snide comment? It felt like a dream. Brenda looked from Maria's stony face to Kevin's terrified one. The fortress of indignation she had built around herself crumbled into dust, leaving her exposed and shivering. I didn't know, she whispered, the words pathetic even to her own ears. It was a mistake. I was having a bad day. I've been here for 22 years. 22 years! The plea was desperate, a last grasp for the loyalty she thought she had earned. And in 22 minutes, you have managed to inflict more financial and reputational damage on this company than any single employee in its history, Maria stated, her voice devoid of sympathy. You have not just created a customer service issue, you have made yourself a catastrophic brand liability. Therefore, your employment with Apex Air is terminated, effective immediately. The finality of the word terminated sucked the air from the room. It was the end. 22 years of early mornings, rude passengers, sore feet, and stale coffee. The entire mediocre tapestry of her adult life erased. Please, she begged, tears now streaming down her face, hot with shame and terror. Don't do this. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. It is far too late for that, Maria said, standing up. Your actions are now the subject of national news. You are the face of a corporate crisis. There is nothing to be done. She nodded at Kevin. Kevin will escort you to retrieve your personal effects from your locker. You have 30 minutes to be off airport property. The walk to her locker was a blur of humiliation. The whispers she'd ignored on the way in were now clearly about her. She saw pity, disgust, and a little bit of fear in the eyes of her former coworkers. She was a ghost already, her belongings, a spare sweater, a tube of lipstick, a few photos, shoved unceremoniously into a cardboard box. She sat in her 2008 Honda Civic in the vast, impersonal employee parking lot for what felt like an hour, the box of her life sitting on the passenger seat. The reality washed over her in sickening waves. When she finally got home to her small third-floor apartment in Queens, she turned on the 10 o'clock news. And there it was, her story. They didn't have her name yet, but they described the incident in excruciating detail. Then she made the mistake of looking online. The WKC's network of savvy professionals had already identified her. Her name, Brenda Jenkins, was everywhere. Shopper, boycott Apex Air. Trump, Brenda the bigot. Her 10-year-old Facebook profile picture, a poorly lit selfie, had become a meme, the face of casual racism. The unraveling accelerated with horrifying speed. Her termination was just the beginning. The next week, she began her job search, applying for similar positions at other airlines, at travel agencies, at hotels. The first few Zoom interviews seemed promising until the inevitable moment the interviewer's eyes would flick to the side, no doubt typing her name into Google. The friendly demeanor would instantly cool. Thank you for your time, Ms. Jenkins. We'll be in touch, they'd say, their voices flat. They never were. She was untouchable, an industry pariah. Her one close friend from work, a woman with whom she'd shared countless complaints and coffees, stopped answering her texts after a few curt, non-committal replies. The social fabric of her life, thin as it was disintegrating. The final blow came 2 weeks later. A certified letter from her landlord, citing a clause in her lease about behavior that brings the property into public disrepute due to the news reporters who had camped outside for a few days. It was an eviction notice. Broke, unemployable, and utterly alone, Brenda was forced to do the one thing she swore she never would. She packed the remnants of her life into her old car and drove to her elderly mother's cramped, siding-clad house in a forgotten corner of New Jersey. The room she moved into was the one she'd grown up in, complete with faded floral wallpaper and the ghosts of her teenage disappointments. It was the ultimate symbol of her failure. Her mother, a woman worn down by life, regarded her with a quiet, bottomless sorrow that was far worse than anger. One afternoon, as Brenda sat staring blankly at the wall, her mother brought her a cup of tea. "You keep blaming that woman at the airport," her mother said softly, her voice raspy. "You blame the airline. You blame the news. You blame those people on the internet." "They ruined my life," Brenda snapped, her voice cracking. Her mother shook her head slowly. "No, Bren. They just held up a mirror. I always told you, bitterness is a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die from it." The simple truth of the words shattered the last of Brenda's defenses. It wasn't the passenger. It wasn't the airline. It was her. Her own petty need for a moment of power. Her own sour disdain for the world. Her own casual cruelty. That was the poison, and she had been drinking it for years. Now finally it had consumed her entirely. The sobs that racked her body were not for her lost job or her lost apartment. They were for the vast, empty ruin of her own life, a wasteland of her own creation. The karma had arrived, not as a sudden bolt of lightning, but as a slow, grinding, and absolute erosion of everything she was. While Brenda Jenkins' life was collapsing into a black hole of her own making, Dr. Imani Hayes was in her study in London's Holland Park, a tranquil, book-lined room overlooking a rain-slicked garden. She was not celebrating. There was a profound sadness in her as she watched the news reports and the social media firestorm she had unleashed. The goal had never been the immolation of a single, miserable woman. That was merely the unfortunate, if necessary, collateral damage. Her focus was on the disease, not just the symptom. She took no joy in the cascading alerts on her phone showing Apex Air's stock in freefall or the breathless news commentary dissecting the crisis. Instead, she spent her time in quiet, focused communication with her Global Leadership Council. On a secure video call, with screens showing the faces of her most trusted allies in Chicago, Toronto, Atlanta, and Johannesburg, she was the picture of calm authority. "They will see this as a financial threat first and foremost," commented Robert Akinjide, the sharp-minded surgeon from Chicago, his voice crisp even through the speaker. "Their first move will be to try and buy our silence, a massive donation to a charity of our choice, lifetime travel perks for the council, the usual corporate playbook." Amelia Davies, the London-based venture capitalist, chimed in, "Exactly. They'll try to make it transactional. They need to understand this is existential. We must be prepared to hold the line, even if it means disrupting our members' travel for months. The short-term pain is worth the long-term principle." Imani listened to them all, nodding slowly. "You are both right," she finally said, her voice commanding the screen. "They will offer money and we will refuse. They will offer platitudes and we will demand substance. Our position is simple. We are not for sale. Our dignity is not a commodity to be traded. When they reach out, and they will, we will be ready, not with a list of demands for compensation, but with a blueprint for their atonement." She had already been working on it, drafting a document that went far beyond a simple apology. Meanwhile, 3,500 miles away in New York, the Apex Air headquarters felt like a besieged fortress. In a 40th floor boardroom nicknamed the War Room, the mood was grim. A massive screen on one wall showed a horrifyingly red graph of APX stock performance. Another showed a live feed of trending social media topics, where Boycott Apex Air and the newly emerged Brenda the Bigot were holding strong. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and pure corporate terror. Richard Sterling stood before the screen, his tie loosened, his face pale and haggard. He hadn't been home in 2 days. He was surrounded by his top executives, legal, communications, marketing, operations. "Our legal team suggests we could file a suit against the WKC for tortious interference," a man in a pinstripe suit offered weakly. "And what would we claim? That they're defaming us by accurately reporting what our employee did?" Sarah Chen, the COO, shot back, her voice laced with ice. "The press would crucify us. It would be like pouring gasoline on the fire." "What about a counter PR campaign?" the head of marketing suggested. "Highlight all our diversity initiatives, our charitable work." A campaign that would be immediately drowned out by tens of thousands of people sharing their own negative experiences with our airline? Sarah countered again, pointing to the social media feed, where a flood of news stories were now appearing in the wake of the main incident. We have a credibility crisis. You can't market your way out of that. We have to act our way out. Richard Sterling finally turned from the screen. The fight had gone out of him. The bravado he'd felt in his Maybach a few days ago was a distant memory. He was a numbers guy, and the numbers were telling him one thing. He was losing, catastrophically. "She's right," he said, his voice raspy. "All of this, it's noise. We're trying to patch 100 leaks when the dam has already burst. There is only one person who can stop this." He looked at Sarah. "Get me in a room with Dr. Hayes. No lawyers, no PR people. Just me and you. I don't care where. I don't care when. Make it happen." It took 24 hours of delicate back-channel negotiations through a mutual acquaintance, but a meeting was set. Imani chose the location, a private suite at the Dorchester in London, a bastion of old-world luxury that would serve as a starkly neutral ground. When Richard Sterling and Sarah Chen entered the suite, they found Imani Hayes standing by the window, looking down at Park Lane. She turned to greet them, not with hostility, but with a cool, appraising neutrality that was somehow more unnerving. She was in her element. They were on foreign soil, asking for mercy. "Dr. Hayes," Sterling began, foregoing a handshake. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual command. "Thank you for seeing us. On behalf of every single person at Apex Air, from myself down to the baggage handlers, I want to offer my most profound, unreserved apology. What happened to you was appalling. It was inexcusable. It represents a failure on every level of our organization, and the responsibility for that failure is ultimately mine." Imani listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. She gestured for them to sit on a plush sofa while she took a single armchair opposite them. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice calm and measured, "I acknowledge your apology. But let us be clear about why you are here. You are not here because one of your employees was cruel to me. You are here because that cruelty is costing you hundreds of millions of dollars. Your pain is financial. My pain, and the pain of the community I represent, is existential. Do you understand the difference?" The directness of the question caught Sterling off guard. I think I do," he stammered. "Then you will understand that this cannot be fixed with money," Imani continued, her gaze unwavering. "We have been down that road before. A corporation messes up. They write a large check to a community organization, issue a press release about their generosity, and a year later, nothing has changed. That cycle ends today." Sterling, desperate to regain some control, leaned forward. "We understand. We are prepared to do whatever it takes. We will make a landmark donation to the WKC Foundation. We will offer a lifetime of free first-class travel to you and your entire board. We want to demonstrate in tangible terms how sorry we are. Just tell us what you need." This was the moment. Imani let the offer hang in the air, the silence stretching until it became deeply uncomfortable. Then she gave a small, sad smile. "Mr. Sterling, you still believe you are in a negotiation. You are not. This is an education," she said. She reached for a thick, leather-bound folder on the table beside her and slid it across the polished wood. "The WKC does not want your money. Keeping it would be a tacit endorsement of your current culture. What we demand is far more expensive. We demand that you change." Sterling and Chen stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. Tentatively, Sterling opened it. Inside was not a legal document, but a meticulously detailed, multi-phase plan for corporate reform. As he read, his face shifted from apprehension to sheer astonishment. Sarah Chen leaned over to read with him, her eyes widening. "This is a complete operational overhaul," Sarah murmured, stunned. "It is a blueprint for becoming a company worthy of our business," Imani corrected gently, and then she began to explain her rationale. "You will see the first point is mandatory in-person training, not some online video that employees can click through while checking their email. I'm talking about an immersive, multi-day program designed and led by an independent, Black-led consultancy that we will select. Your employees need to hear directly from the people their behavior impacts. She continued, the diversity audit must be conducted by a third party, and the results must be made public. Transparency is the only disinfectant for institutional bias. You need to know where you are failing, from your hiring pipeline right up to your boardroom, and your customers deserve to know it too. She paused, letting the weight of the proposal sink in. And the most crucial part, the Civilian Oversight Board. This cannot be an internal committee. It must have real power, comprised of our members and leaders from other minority communities, to review and adjudicate complaints of discrimination. It's about accountability. When your passengers know there is a real, independent body they can turn to, it changes the power dynamic entirely. Sterling was speechless. This was unprecedented. It was a demand for him to open up his company to outside scrutiny in a way no major airline ever had. It was terrifying. It was also, he knew deep in his gut, the only way forward. My board will call this extortion, he said quietly, almost to himself. Let them, Imani replied without malice. You can tell them it is the price of doing business in the 21st century. It is the cost of respect. Your airline has a choice, Mr. Sterling. You can refuse, and we will permanently divert our $1 billion of annual spending to your competitors. We will build them into the inclusive airline you should have been. Or you can accept these terms and embark on the difficult, necessary work of truly earning back our trust. You can become the model for how a global corporation confronts its own prejudice. She rose from her chair. The choice is yours. My community has waited long enough for change. You have 72 hours. The subsequent emergency board meeting at Apex Air was reportedly brutal. Old guard members shouted about capitulation and setting a dangerous precedent. But Sterling and Chen, armed with damning financial data and the cold, hard logic of Imani's proposal, fought back. The argument was simple. They could either endure a short, sharp period of painful transformation, or they could face a long, slow death by 1,000 cuts as their brand became synonymous with bigotry. In the end, the numbers won. They agreed to every term. The joint press conference was a global media event. Richard Sterling stood before the world, not as a powerful CEO, but as a penitent leader. He read from a prepared statement, but his emotion was raw and unscripted as he detailed the company's failures and laid out the radical reform plan, crediting the WKC for forcing them to confront a difficult truth. Then Imani took the stage. She spoke not of victory, but of opportunity. She spoke of turning a moment of pain into a movement for progress. She announced the WKC's probationary return, framing it not as a pardon, but as an act of partnership in the hard work ahead. 6 months later, Imani Hayes was at JFK's Terminal 4 once more, at the very same gate. The Apex Air branding was the same, but the atmosphere felt different. The agents at the counter were diverse, their interactions with passengers patient and engaged. A new prominently displayed passenger Bill of Rights, a direct result of the reforms, was posted near the desk. As she presented her documents, the young gate agent, a Latino man with a warm smile, looked at her name. His eyes lit up with recognition, not of a troublesome passenger, but of a historical figure in their company's story. Dr. Hayes, he said, his voice imbued with genuine deference, it is an absolute honor to welcome you. We've all been through the new training program. What you did, it changed things here. For the better. Thank you. Imani was taken aback, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. It was one interaction, one person, but it was proof. Proof that the structure she had architected was being built, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. The journey was long, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it was moving in the right direction. So what's the real lesson here? The story of Dr. Imani Hayes and Brenda Jenkins isn't just about one racist comment in the spectacular fallout. It's a powerful, real-world testament to something much bigger. It shows that power doesn't always come from the loudest voice in the room, but often from the most strategic. Dr. Hayes didn't just get angry, she got organized. She leveraged the collective power of her community to turn a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for systemic change. This story is a stark reminder to every corporation that, in our hyper-connected world, Your brand is defined not by your marketing slogans, but by the actions of every single employee. And for every one of us, it's a lesson in the power we hold together. One voice can be ignored, but the unified voice of a community demanding respect can bring a billion-dollar giant to its knees. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more true stories of karma, consequence, and the fight for justice. Let us know in the comments what you think. Could you have stayed as calm as Dr. Hayes?